There's Jimmy. God damn.
Got it. Okay. Morning, Mike. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the January 23rd weather-threatened meeting of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. Despite the fact that the snow is days off, though it's seemingly certain, it's having an impact already on Maryland and Baltimore, including that some of our local officials who are not surprisingly involved in transportation in their jurisdictions have press conferences and other things this morning. So they send their regrets. We totally obviously understand. I would also add that I had a very good meeting with the acting secretary this week, Katie Thompson, and it was excellent. We got to review a number of things. And she actually had intended to be here today, but also is affected by weather planning at the state MDOT level. We have extended, of course, a rolling invitation to her. And I expect that we'll get her here hopefully at the next meeting. But she wanted to be here and sends her regrets as well. So we have a slightly smaller crew for that reason. I hope everybody will remain safe and we'll get through the storm, whatever it turns out to be, somewhere between 8 and 800 inches. The forecasters are saying. Okay, so thank you everybody for being here. I don't have any major opening remarks except to say we're at our usual very important waypoint in the cycle.
Okay, bye-bye.
What's that? Is that gold food?
Joe McAndrew, you are not muted. There you go. Thank you, Joe. You know, this January meeting is always a big meeting because it allows us to hear more directly about the final budget and CTP, which of course we will do. We're on the cusp of the legislative session. There are lots of pieces of legislation that are of direct impact to us. So in addition to our ordinary conversations, we have those two big buckets of issues that we'll want to get the commission briefed up on and get input on and talk about. So those are important issues. I should recognize Sean Winkler here sitting behind the Katie Thompson nameplate. Sean is representing MDOT today. The deputy secretary, who was planning to be here because of secretary's absence, had a, can I say, pet emergency this morning. So it's hopefully whatever pet is involved will do well, and she's attending to that, and we understand. So Sean, welcome, and familiar face, happy to have you, of course.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so lots to cover. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to the administrator, Holly Arnold, for some remarks and slides and presentation, please.
All right. A little slower up there than it is up here. Good morning. Great to see everyone today. And yes, I'll talk about snow in our presentation as well, because our team is currently in a snow prep meeting as we are getting ready for this weekend's weather. So wanted to highlight some of the things that we've done since the last meeting. First and foremost, a huge thank you to the BRTC members who joined us for the launch of the first of our new Metro subway cars. As a reminder, we are getting 78 new vehicles. This was the first train. It's 3 Mary pairs that went into service a couple weeks ago. We were thrilled to have Secretary Thompson on her first day join us to be able to cut the ribbon. I can't give her every week something as exciting as that, but it was a really great milestone for the system. And just as a reminder, I mean, this is the first rail cars in 40 years for that system. Like, those rail cars are 40 years old. They are past the end of their useful life. We've definitely had some issues with reliability. So we're excited to get this new car into service. We're excited to get all of the new cars into service. And so that is really the goal over the coming year, is to replace those old vehicles with the new ones. And so we're thrilled about that. We also have a video to share. We had some really fantastic speakers. John, that's what it takes me. Sharing of the window. But John and the MDOT team worked together to put together a video kind of highlighting the importance of this investment in Maryland.
This makes our hearts sing, because this is a vital resource that we care deeply about. We have had staff call out from work because a Lyft ride was too expensive for them, and it wasn't going to be worth the pay they were going to receive to need to pay for a ride share. That is absolutely unacceptable. A resource like this is of vital importance.
There are so many people who want to be reliable. They want to be reliable workers. They want to show up to class on time, and they want to make their health appointments. And you're only as reliable as your transit is reliable. So today is about ensuring that all of our residents get to be the reliable residents that they want to be, and it's not transit standing in the way.
Today, we're working together to undo that legacy and countering the disinvestment by being just as intentional in the way that we invest in transit in our city. Expanding options, including by investing in free buses like the Charm City Circulator in neighborhoods that have been without public transit for too long, helping folks get to work, school, the grocery store, and the doctors. And we're also improving the quality of those services by upgrading the safety and efficiency of our transportation system. We're delivering the kind of safe, quality subway cars our residents deserve.
When I go to Annapolis, I have to explain sometimes the importance of transit to folks who maybe live in more sparsely populated places. That's why it's important in a One Maryland model to have our Hitachi subway cars built all the way in lovely Western Maryland, because everyone should see themselves as part of a continuum that lifts the whole state. Whether they need to ride a real car every day, they see that they're tied to the mobility of not just Baltimore City, but their brothers and sisters across the state of Maryland.
Let me just say a word about that while you're transitioning back. I will take responsibility for asking for that. Obviously, the production of it was done by M.MTA. Meredith Devereaux in particular, and the comm staff who has a background sorry, there you are. Yeah, who has a background in TV journalism and is a great professional, was happy to put that together. And the reason I asked for it, I was there representing the commission along with a few others who were here. And it just struck me how compelling those remarks are, and I specifically asked Meredith not to include M.Dot or MTA people in that little video, who were also great, as you might expect, because we're trying to give voice to others. And I was just so affected, if not even moved, by the remarks. The woman from Hopkins, who you saw first, who talks about, the effect it has on patients, the effect it has on employees, and the effect it has, as she said, on the community was incredibly effective. So, that is like 2 minutes and 3 seconds of gold, I think. And we just have to figure out how to get that message out, maybe even to continue to use the video as well, because it just made for me such a compelling case about what we're trying to do, and to hear those people give voice to it. So please, we'll send it to you. Please, we'll figure out how to get it, socialized. There was you may remember, I think people called it the CTP sizzle reel when the city CTP went, I think well, and that was widely circulated. I'd like, frankly, for this kind of video to get also widely circulated. So I'll ask you to think about that. We'll send it to you, and we'll ask everybody to think about how to get it out there and to use it during the session and with others, because like I said, I think it's pretty effective, very short, punchy piece of advocacy. So thank you for doing that, and Holly, thanks for and it was a great event, really exciting.
Yeah, no, it's a great investment. We're really excited about the improvements it's going to make in the metro system. I rode after the event, riders getting on, lots of really excited comments about like how much this is going to improve their ride. So we're excited about that. Also wanted to give a shout out to the team. We have such a fantastic group of employees at MTA who really focus on giving back to our riders, yes, in the day-to-day that they do, but also beyond that, and the holidays are a great time for that. MTA Police every year choose a family and do an adopt a family. So there's a ton of gifts that they're giving out. We have our holiday bus every year where we offer free rides to folks who are happening to catch it. I happened to catch it on the yellow one time, and the operator was sharing how people get on, they kind of look around and was like, oh, this is great. They try to pay, and there's candy canes instead of being able to pay. So he was excited to share that. We shared some of the holiday traditions that people have, and we did some visits with Santa in our metro system. And again, another opportunity for folks to be able to come. We don't charge anything for that, and a lot of times when you go to the mall, you have to pay for the picture, pay for everything else. So just giving back and maybe allowing for those opportunities for people to experience the system in a positive light. We also celebrated, I don't typically highlight anniversaries, but this one was of such magnitude that I did want to call it out. So Joseph Truitt is our #1 badge at MTA. We celebrated 60 years of his service with the company. He actually started with the Baltimore Transit Company and then transitioned over to MTA. He's a metro operator, drives the trains in the yards still. And so we were really thrilled to celebrate his 60 years with him. We have a lot of folks who, again, have dedicated a lot of their lives to MTA. I think we have half a dozen folks who have more than 50 years of service. He's the only one who has 60. And again, even more than half above 40 years of service. So it's really fun to celebrate those opportunities. Continuing the positive news, we launched our MERC student care program on Wednesday, the 21st. We had previously had a student fare program that was ran by a third party. They went under about 18 months ago, and so the program was discontinued. The MERC staff said, hey, we think we can do this better internally, and so they took it over. It's actually a better program, a better deal for students. So we're thrilled to offer a 50% discount on the MERC fares for eligible students. Since we launched Wednesday afternoon, we've already had 230 applications, so there's definitely a lot of desire for this program. And we did reach out to Tony to help get out the word at College Town, and we're continuing to push that. We just think it's such a fantastic asset to allow access to the entire region, and we want to make sure that the cost isn't a barrier for students.
And we're sending it out to social media and newsletters, both for students, faculty, and staff, so everyone in the network.
Thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate the partnership, and yeah, some of the other ones, colleges aren't part of College Town, we're coordinating as well, so we want to make sure we're getting it out there. High school students are eligible too, so we're pushing that as hard as we can. I did want to give an update on the customer experience side. Some of the things that we talked about in our customer experience action plan, we're continuing to work into implementing. One of the big ones in the CX action plan is shutdowns and better communication during shutdowns, planned or unplanned. And so we did have a planned shutdown for work that Amtrak needed to do for the Frederick Douglass Tunnel on light rail last weekend. And so as part of that, our CX team tested some new signage, rider communications. They were out there at a couple of different stations talking to riders to get feedback on what do you like about the sign, what don't you like about the sign. We're working to ensure that we get everything in both English and Spanish when we're putting it out there. So continuing to make sure we're kind of having that better communication when service is disrupted. I did also want to know, I got a lot of questions about why was the shuttle bus so long for that? The way that light rail is built and the way the signal system is built, the work that Amtrak was doing was right at North Avenue, which is where some of our, that's one of our crossovers there where we would switch trains. And because of that location of the work, there's nowhere else that we can switch trains south of that. So we really have to go all the way between Falls Road and Camden for those shuttle buses. Yeah, the design of the system does impact when some of these things happen, how we have to work. I did also I have my half day with Holly program where people can apply to have me spend a half day with them. So I shadowed the rider experience team a week ago. We went out to Trade Point Atlantic on the 163, talking to a lot of riders just to see what their experience was. Got some really actionable feedback that, we were able to make some calls immediately and make some adjustments and changes. So that was great. Took the 63 and the Navy back into town, and same thing, like seeing them out there talking with folks was really fantastic. We do, every time we send them out as well, we do have someone who is fluent in Spanish. So on the Navy, seeing them in action was really cool to see and get some of that feedback there. So I think it's really important for us, and we don't always get that. Do an update as well on schools. So our Youth Transit Council, we're in the third group of our YTC, and they're continuing to meet. I joined them for a meeting in December, and man, those are some smart kids. Really fantastic questions. They're excited about transit, excited about making it better. And so, thrilled to have our team working with them over the coming year to continue to expand that. We're also working on a city school engagement plan. There's a lot of things that we do, but it's not necessarily outlined anywhere publicly. So, helping to kind of codify some of that, improve our communication. We have some short-term improvements to improve engagement. I still think that there's a little bit of a disconnect sometimes between understanding how to use the transit system and the education there. And so we're really committed to making sure that people understand the different options that they have available to them. And we're working with city schools on an updated MOU to try and finalize that. I did also want to update on the cyber incident. It feels like it was forever ago and also yesterday, but for, just as a reminder, we did experience a cyber attack August 24th, right, the day before school started, that took all of our systems down. The IT team in coordination with the Department of IT has really worked to get us back up and running. It is long and complex. Every kind of system that we have has to be rebuilt. It has to be retested. All the tie-ins to the different systems have to be kind of re-tied in. So we're continuing to work through that. Systems are coming back every week, and they're on a good path, but we still aren't fully back where we were before. One of the areas for our operators, the good news is we are seeing more real-time information. We're close to where we were at the beginning of August, but we're still seeing some issues with head signs, where the buses will have the wrong head signs. We're seeing some issues with operators not being on, and that translates into real-time information for our operators. About 8% less in terms of accurate real-time versus where we were this time last year, and so we're working to make sure we improve that. We're also seeing some issues with the passenger information signs at major hubs. So like Penn North, Penn Station have those standalone signs. We've had them up and then they went back down. So we're troubleshooting and trying to make sure we continue to fix that. And I do also want to note the customer experience dashboard, which we are committed to getting updated, doesn't have the information that we need. And in some cases, we have several months of just like lost data. So we will end up with a pretty big gap in the information that we're able to provide. On the paratransit side, we are fully operational there. On-time performance is 96%. So I want to give a ton of kudos to the focus on ensuring that that service is where it needs to be. And we are working to develop a mid and long range plan to better protect the agency from future threats. So there's a lot of things that we're going to be doing over the coming years to ensure that something like this can't happen again. And then I do want to update a little safety and security. I get an annual report from MTA Police about the system and the safety on the system. I want a huge shout out, Part 1 crimes are down 50% over the past decade. Like it really is a huge improvement. And they were already very low. Like we've always been incredibly low. And even then they're continuing to drive that number down. We saw a 13% increase in 2025. We also celebrated no homicides on the system in the year. And aggravated assaults are down 33% year over year. So just a huge amount of work that the police do to make sure that crime is staying off of the system. Their clearance rate is fantastic. We also continue to make sure that we're investing in helping our community with administering Narcan. Over 200 lives were saved by administering Narcan. And as I noted last time with the event, anyone can access Narcan in any of our subway stations for folks who may need it for any reason.
Holly, do you know on the Narcan, you did talk about that last time. Are those typically, do the officers themselves carry Narcan, or do they simply have access to the boxes and so on?
No, our officers have carried Narcan for a number of years. It's a partnership with the health department. So they provide it, we carry it and administer it.
Do you know, I know the boxes are relatively recent. So I assume that most of those 200 are officer carried sort of things, or
majority officer, but there's some it's not fully officers in here, right? So there's other folks who do administer it on the system.
Thanks.
We're also providing voluntary training for our employees who want to carry. So we have folks who come into the divisions and they're providing that training as well. So anyone who wants it has access. And I've heard from the folks who are monitoring and maintaining the boxes, it is being used. I've seen people in the stations, come in and grab something and then go on their way. So, we're glad to provide that as a place for people to get that. We did also launch CSAY, as I mentioned, and we've seen some good utilization of that. It's a good option for folks who may not want to pick up the phone and call police, who can report. I used it a couple weeks ago. I was actually heading up to our police station, and there was a guy at Cold Spring station who thought yelling at everyone at the top of the escalator was a good move. And so I noted it on CSAY. The police came and they escorted him off of the property so that he could go yell somewhere else. So again, it's a great option for folks to be able to help again, that kind of safety and security on the system.
What's considered a Part 1 crime?
Part 1 crimes are like the most violent crimes. So it's, homicides, rapes, violent assaults, things like that.
Unfortunate question to ask, but have you done any enhanced protocols or procedures for federal enforcement that's coming into places?
We, yes, so MTA police are, very aware of the law, and we are working closely with our legal team on making sure we're following the law.
How about the operators? People who will come and invade buses and things like that, if they do. Just wondering.
In that case, the operator would be instructed to call MTA police. Like we defer to the police in that. And then finally, snow prep. Since it is very imminent, the team is in a meeting right now talking about it. We are out preemptively salting our sidewalks, our platforms, stairs, parking. We have made sure we have shovels and plows at all of our divisions and our modes. We've got a good communications plan that is in process, and we're coordinating with all the local jurisdictions. We do have a website that is available, it's just MTA winter weather is the website where we show how when weather happens, we start to kind of pull back our bus service in particular. Right, we'll start pulling our express buses off and locals, and then eventually we get down to just city links or suspending fully. Same thing with paratransit. We also know where our hotspots are, where the buses get stuck, and so we'll do detours early before we get someone stuck. Our main priority is to make sure that our operators and our riders are safe and they're not getting stuck anywhere. On the rail side, we run ICE trains on Metro and light rail. So basically all night, Saturday night, there will be operators out running trains back and forth to make sure that the catenary and the track don't ice over. So it'll help to ensure that we can continue to service there. On the Metro side, if we do need to, we may pull service from the above ground portions. That's what we've done previously, just because sometimes we deal with ice and freezing there.
Can I mean, this is more of a qualitative rather than a quantitative question, but like, what does it take to stop the service? Like, how bad does it have to be? Is it a question of snow depth or a question of ice versus snow? And, how likely is it that you have to suspend service versus just kind of, no pun intended, plow on?
Yeah, I mean, at my time in the agency, we have suspended bus service twice. Once was the 2016, where we had 20 something inches of snow. And then the other time was Snowmageddon in 2010. The 2016, we preemptively pulled service versus 2010. Buses actually ended up getting stuck out there. So our goal is the former rather than the latter. My team and I, we have a meeting set up tomorrow afternoon where we'll take a look at the latest forecast. It's going to depend a little bit on like what is the quality of the roads. So we'll be working with Baltimore City and Baltimore County to understand like what plowing they've done, what pre-treating they've done, how much is coming down, and like is it icy, is it not? So our goal is to make a decision, Saturday afternoon, evening, so that we can let people know what the plan is.
And just, I'm sorry, these questions just come up sometimes. I've certainly seen buses towed by MTA, heavy duty tow trucks. Is that sort of the stuck bus protocol you send out? And I don't even know how many we have of those kind of tow rigs to get buses out of things.
So we have a few. Again, it kind of depends on what happens. We had a couple years ago in a major snow incident, we had 7 buses get stuck on Druid Hill. There's a hill over there where we relied on Baltimore City to actually come in with a plow us out, and we were able to move. Again, it really is just situational. But our goal is to not have that happen, and so we want to do everything we can about it.
Just curious. Thank you.
Yeah. Again, and if we can run service, we will run service, but it's fully going to depend on how safe it can be. The good news is we do have lower ridership generally on Sunday, and with the weather, I think a lot of people are staying in. So I think it'll be lower ridership. On the paratransit side, we focus on medically necessary trips in incidents like this. So we'll really make sure that if someone needs to get to the hospital or doctor, we're still providing that services best we can. And then I'll finalize just kind of what else is upcoming at MTA. So Transit Equity Day, we celebrate every year on February 4th for Rosa Parks. And so we offer free transit. So we will continue that. We are making our winter schedule adjustments. So as a reminder, we do make adjustments to our schedule 3 times a year. The big ones are in the summer, beginning and the end. The winter adjustment is just kind of fixing some things that are wrong with the schedule. Like we might have to add run times or things like that. So we're making those adjustments, and that'll go into effect February 8th. We're also making some changes on the Penn Line schedule effective February 16th. Shows how interconnected our system is. So Amtrak is doing work in New Jersey, bridge replacement up there. And because of that work, they anticipate congestion kind of up and down the railroad. And so in order to accommodate that, and Amtrak's going to like a weekend schedule. So in order to accommodate that, we are making some adjustments to our system. So information about that's going to be going out shortly. It'll last about a month that we'll have those adjustments. And then finally, I know you're going to hear about legislation shortly, but MTA does have budget hearings in the House and the Senate coming up in February. And you guys have paid close attention to those, so those are the dates for that.
I just wanted to get back to the cybersecurity update, and like many things that happen in operations, I just wanted to kind of acknowledge and congratulate that it's an invisible solution that takes a lot of time and energy. I think there's the obvious hard costs in terms of technology and, likely consultants and data retrieval, but there's the soft cost across the entire system. So we as a body spend a lot of time on the capital side, of course, vehicles and equipment. But I think that those kind of pieces have a direct ripple impact to riders.
This meeting is being recorded.
Also, all of MTA staff. And I just want to note, we are closing in on 4 or 5 months, closing in on 6 months. And only if you've kind of been in an operation of this kind of scale do you understand it takes that long to rectify, and you're still figuring out how do we plan ahead. So I think that our ability to also lift up, this takes resources in order to fix. And so we spend a lot of time, particularly as we head into the budget system, talking about equipment and vehicles. But I think that it's just as important as a body that we talk about the operational capacity and the ability to, in the modern day, respond to these kind of things. So kudos to staff, but also just an acknowledgement, thanks to my fellow commissioners, that, this is a time and resource that was unanticipated, that had to be addressed, generally reaches crisis level situation. So I just wanted to kind of take a moment to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And, especially kudos to the employees who just stepped up and did things in different ways. To your point, when they're starting doing things in different ways, the other normal stuff that they're doing isn't happening. And so we are still kind of recovering from that. There's a number of systems that it's still paper-based and whatnot. So the team has done a fantastic job of just continuing to push through and get back. So thank you for that. Any other questions?
Other questions for the administrator? I just wanted to say, there's a lot going on, and I always really appreciate these reports. And one thing I just wanted to sort of highlight, I don't know, it always sort of strikes me, Holly, and this is just a credit to you personally, is how connected you are to the people in the operation. I mean, it's just, whether it's social media, which I see, or the things you're presenting here, the fact that you're out there, the half day with Holly, the fact that when I've been with you and you see operators, you're always greeting them and they know you. And I know you've been there a while, of course, but you worked hard at that. And I think it's not something that everybody would have done. So I just really appreciate that in addition to all the high level stuff and all the complex operational stuff, which you could probably just sit in an office and do, you're out there seeing people and doing it. I think there's just a real spirit of that. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, as I tell the team all the time, they're the ones doing the work. My job is to make sure they have what they need. Talking to them helps with that.
Great. Well, thanks. Other questions? If not, we'll move on to the next item. Who's handling the MDOT CTP part?
I'll lead it, but we will have a team effort because we are a team. There you go. Continuing the teamwork.
Sorry.
Ken's the screen guy.
That's perfect. Thanks. Yeah, great. I think the audience has the other one, right? So we're
Yes.
Thanks, John. I also have to say about Holly, unlike me, she does all that without a script, which I think continues to speak to how she lives and breathes the system every day. But good morning, Chairman Laria, and fellow members of the commission. It's a pleasure to be with you here today on behalf of the Moore Miller administration. Unfortunately, Acting Secretary Thompson, as well as Deputy Secretary Biddle, cannot be here today, so you are stuck with me. But thank you again for inviting us to share an update on the administration's work and our continued commitment to transit in the Baltimore region. I wanted to share a couple of highlights from our recently released final CTP as of Wednesday, and kudos to the team sitting in the back there for getting this out there. It is a tremendous effort. My remarks will primarily focus on MDOT-wide investments and priorities, a brief overview of the operating budget, as well as touching on the continued financial risks facing the department as well as the larger state. Administrator Arnold and Hurd's team will then provide a more detailed specific overview of MTA's budget contained in the final CTP. And I also have to acknowledge Jeff Anderson, our Chief of Programming, Planning and Project Delivery in the back, as well as Drew Morrison, Senior Policy Advisor for the same topics, who I will also be bringing up for Q&A for all of your hard questions. And then I also have to acknowledge Matt here, our awesome Director of Government Affairs, who will also be providing you a briefing on our departmental bills shortly. Looking at the capital budget, we released this on Wednesday, as I mentioned, and we are extremely pleased that this program is largely consistent with the budget proposed in the draft. And that is in large thanks to Governor Moore's budget last year, the BRTC, and our work together as a part of the MOVE Coalition to support the new revenue package. That was absolutely critical to stabilizing the program. These additional dollars help us maintain and support the overall program and the governor's priorities, which are focused on safety, maintaining the system, and driving economic development. The plan, as required by law, is balanced, and compared to the draft, this is a $600 million increase. The increase is largely attributed to additional federal leveraging for certain road projects, bond sales that have entered the program, as well as some rollover funds from last year. That being said, revenues to the state's Transportation Trust Fund have come in under projections, and the program continues to face pressures, and we'll get into that later. Some key highlights from our final CTP include a continued commitment of the program to transit as well as safety. This includes the $1.4 billion light rail modernization program and highway safety projects across the state. We're also continuing to invest in transforming troubled corridors on our state highway system into complete streets projects that protect all roadway users. The State Highways Administration's Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, or PSAP, project focuses on the design and construction of these corridors to keep our most vulnerable users safe, those who walk, bike, and roll. The final CTP also makes strategic investments to spur economic growth, including building a new state-of-the-art air traffic control tower at the Martin State Airport. If you have ever seen that tower, it is from World War II and is barely taller than me. So we are very excited to have a new tower there. Rehabilitating the berths at the Dundalk Marine Terminal at the Port of Baltimore, as well as continuing our one of my favorite projects, the Mid-Bay Chesapeake Island Restoration Project, which is a partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to ensure we can keep the Port of Baltimore shipping lanes open for decades to come. In addition to modernizing the light rail system, we're continuing to work to recapitalize our transit system and ensure it provides the quality services that all Baltimoreans deserve. This is a leading priority for the Moore-Miller administration and includes our continued support of the Red Line, meeting 90% of MTA's needs in the CNI, and advancing real estate work for 5th Bus Division, and much more for MTA's operations. Taking a look across the final CTP, this graph shows the breakdown of the department's capital program by investment area. Approximately 40%, or about $8.4 billion, is programmed to help maintain our transportation system and keep it in a strong working order. This is about a $400 million increase from the last CTP, and we are continuing to reinvest and recapitalize our system across modes. We also meet the requirements of the TSIA in fiscal years 27 to 29. MDOT has also made the highest investment in a 6-year CTP history in bike ped safety projects by investing more than $500 million across the program. And as I previously mentioned, we're continuing to drive economic growth at the Port of Baltimore Martin State Airport and leaning into transit-oriented development opportunities across the state.
Sean, can I ask you, or an appropriate person, just go back one slide, to just remind, I mean, I think most people know, but just can you briefly, the TSIA, what it is, what it means, and also what its sort of sunset, not sunset exactly, but what the sort of future year projections are? Someone will be able to do that. You guys coming up to do that?
It seems like it.
Coming up to be available. Yeah, I'm assuming that someone, I just don't recall, and I want to make sure people know.
There's a bill in to push, extend the horizon. I think it's 2030.
It currently ends at FY 29.
29.
Right, so let's go back a step. Mandated investment by the state in MTA, transit capital investment. So I think it's good.
State of good repair.
State of good repair, yeah, right, sorry, right. It was intended to, I forget when it was passed, but it was intended to sort of start making the state spend money on state of good repair.
It was
and it had-
based on the prior capital needs inventory, the 2022 one, where we identified an average level of funding that was needed to maintain the system. And so it had slightly different levels on the year. It didn't always align with the CNI.
Yeah, but I think it goes back, I looked at it recently and I think at 29, it goes back down. Again, I'm just trying to remember and I want to make sure that since we're all talking about it and you mentioned it, everybody understands what it is and what it does.
Yeah, and I think that year speaks to a sunset, which we're seeing in several programs right now.
And there is, if it did extend beyond 29, we would also meet those levels in 30 and 31 with the current seating.
No, I understand, and I should say this, I understand that the work that was done particularly last year regarding state of good repair, to some extent satisfied the original purpose of the TSIA, and the TSIA provides a baseline, which I've been told, and I haven't looked at it, but I've been told that you said again, you're exceeding the TSIA, which was passed at a time when people were like, we got to get there. Now we've sort of gotten there, and the question is, what does it look like going forward? Does there need to be a mandate? Does the CTP without a mandate sufficient to achieve it? And I think that's something the legislators are going to have to wrestle with. They did it in the first place because it wasn't happening, and now, fortunately, it is happening. Okay, I just want to socialize that for.
And I do understand there's a bill that's been dropped, but I have not seen it, so I'm not.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Sean.
No, you're good. And we're proud to be investing in state of good repair. This next graph breaks down funding in the CTP by mode and fiscal year. You can see funding for MTA increases through fiscal year 2029, and local transportation funding is consistent with legislative requirements. Switching to the operating side, and I'll just note on this slide, we've had some last minute rounding here. So there'll be slight discrepancies between the numbers you're about to see between this and MTA, but I assure you it is rounding, but just wanted to point that out for members of the public using these slides. But switching to the operating budget, the plan for the upcoming fiscal year includes a 6% growth in MTA's operating budget year over year. This supports rising costs from workforce and contractual rates across the department, and operating continues to be a priority across our modes.
Can I ask a question there in terms of, and in some ways, I think I'm stating the obvious, but maybe not. In terms of the 5% growth, it really is just to keep up with what is already happening. There's no actual enhancement. Okay.
It's increased staffing costs, increased contractual costs, it's maintaining.
But again, just tracking economic trends, it's not an actual improvement, enhancement. It's not a knock, it's an observation, because 5% sounds great, but in actuality, it's just meeting the global economy.
Yeah, but it's still dollars from a limited source. And, we still have to ensure we can meet the needs of our riders and, accommodate those increases.
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point, when you do look around the country at some of the fiscal issues that other transit agencies are having, like being able to maintain and have the 5% is a big accomplishment.
Yes, and I would agree with that. I think I'm trying to differentiate that amount of money is keeping us where we are. It takes that level of investment to stay where we are, whereas people often demand and expect improvements. But even staying where we are is the accomplishment in this fiscal climate.
And I will just say, as a part of that too, operating is, in some senses, has to be our priority with dollars because there is very limited federal leveraging opportunities with operating. The operating sources are primarily derived from state and local governments.
And Kate will get into some details on the specifics of the MTA one. There are some additional positions provided for the purple line police, so there is a little bit of expansion.
Looking ahead, the TTF remains constrained. Projections show spending continues to outpace revenue growth. Larger economic trends are also starting to impact the TTF more and more, especially with revenues from capital gains and corporate income taxes entering the program. As we move forward, we need to do our best to manage our budget effectively within existing resources and make hard choices to ensure we're making strategic investments to maintain what we have, improve the safety of our system, and identify targeted opportunities to grow our state's economy. That being said, we strongly believe the final CTP lays out a solid and balanced plan for the work ahead. We greatly appreciate the stability the additional transportation revenues from last session bring to the program. The program builds on the administration's work and further enhances our commitment to safety, state of good repair, and economic growth. We believe this helps to lay the foundation to securing Baltimore's transit future. On behalf of Acting Secretary Thompson, I appreciate your attention this morning. We're happy to answer any questions there, but certainly happy to turn over to MTA for specifics.
Thank you, Sean. Are there questions from the commission, at least on the MDOT? We can circle back to MDOT. I'm not going to close the door on it, obviously, but are there any immediate questions for MDOT before we roll into MTA? I just want to say one thing. It's not a question for you, but when I see that presentation, particularly see the last slide, it just points out to me how important it is for us to find new revenues for transportation in the state of Maryland. We just have to find a way to do it. And it may not happen because the BRTC wants to do it, but it's just evident that not only is the TTF a complicated way to deal with it, with gas tax going down, all the things that we know, but there must be some other way for us to anticipate. I would submit, and I haven't reviewed the entire MDOT budget, but I would submit that there's just not any fat in that MDOT budget. It doesn't matter what mode you are, and frankly, it doesn't matter if you're more of a transit person or a highways person. Those are all valid needs for Marylanders in different parts of the state for different reasons, and there's obviously some prioritization that has to be made. But it's just sort of evident that there's just not enough money to do the things that need to be done. So I'm really hopeful that as we move forward together, we can have a serious conversation about ways in which we can find new transportation revenues so that we can actually get to the many, many things that really have been heard. So I just, when I see that slide, it just reminds me of the issue. One way to fix that problem, frankly, is to find more revenues. Maybe the only way to fix that problem is to find more revenues. Okay, well, let's move over to the MTA presentation. Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi.
Shivering a little. Kate Sylvester, MTA's Chief Program Delivery Officer. Good to be with you again this morning. As mentioned, I'll share a little bit more detail on MTA's budget in the CTP that just came out. So the overall big picture highlights, our light rail modernization program, which we're very excited about, is fully funded. We're moving quickly on that project. We're in active procurement on several of the contracts that are part of it. The Purple Line and the Amtrak Northeast Corridor major projects commitments remain fully funded. So primarily the largest piece of that for MTA is the Frederick Douglass Tunnel. Red Line and Southern Maryland Rapid Transit planning are fully funded. And as mentioned earlier, the property acquisition for a future 5th bus division is funded as well. MTA's operating needs to maintain our service are fully funded. And as was just discussed, we know that around the country, this is something not every transit agency is able to say. So we are very thankful that we are in that position. In addition, major state of good repair projects are advancing. This includes our Metro rail car replacement project, which is ongoing. As mentioned, we have the first car in service and we have nearly the entire fleet in final assembly in Hagerstown at this point. So the rest of those will be coming soon. System-wide elevator and escalator rehab projects. Elevators will be hitting procurement here very soon. Our bus and mobility vehicle replacements, keeping those on an annual schedule of replacements is critically important for sort of just the day-to-day operations of our maintenance operation in particular. So again, that's important that we have those on track. And we do have a significant State of Good repair rehabilitation project at our Eastern Bus Division that's moving forward as well. Just a few of the highlights of quite a few State of Good repair projects that are underway. Overall, 90% of our State of Good repair needs are met in the years 26 to 30, so the current year through the next 4 years. And then when we look out to 2031, that drops down to about 60% of the needs at that point. We know that the long-term State of Good repair needs are significant. And as we develop this budget, supported and in collaboration with MDOT, State of Good repair remains the priority. We are very focused on directing resources to take care of the transit systems and resources that we currently have. So drilling into the numbers a little bit here, just as a quick reminder, I think everyone knows this. When we look at the CTP, the capital program, we're always looking at a 6-year window. So as we shift to this year's CTP, that 6-year window shifts 1 year forward. So 5 of the years are the same. Things that we spent last year drop out, and we're adding that new 6th year, 2031, into this. So this is a bit of a look back over the last 3 years, draft and final CTPs. You can see the bottom line there. The increase over time is significant. When we look at just the Baltimore services highlighted there in the middle, we don't have a subtotal on this slide, we do on the next. There is general stability there. And you can see the growth in the MARC program that's largely driven by the Frederick Douglass Tunnel project. That's where you'll see that in our budget. And on the next slide, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, just looking at comparing the previous final CTP to this year, so you really get a sense of what's changing. So top line, our total CTP this year is very stable compared to last year. As you can see, we're down, I think that's less than $20 million. So on a percentage basis, very small. So very, very stable when we talk total dollars. When we drill into those numbers a little bit, the Baltimore core services are also stable at 43% of the MTA's budget. You can see there's a little bit of variation there. We continue to see that light rail modernization program playing a really dominant role in our budget. So with bringing in 2031, we bring in another big spending year for that program, as we'll be really ramping up at that point. So we do see some growth in light rail reflecting that. The Metro program, we see a little bit of a drop there. That's because we will complete the Metro rail car replacement project in 2027. So that project is slowly moving out of our budget as we accomplish those expenditures. And we don't have another huge Metro project coming in to replace it. So we expect to see some of that fluctuation. The red line project, similarly, we see a little bit of a dip there, but that's just reflecting that those expenditures in FY25 are no longer in this CTP, and we're basically working through that $150 million commitment to the planning of that project right now. A couple other things to note, our agency-wide budget includes a variety of things ranging from things like elevators and escalators that we might do a contract across multiple modes to our staffing and program support funds. Do see a sizable drop there this year. That is a reduction in our program support staffing funds. Those fluctuate year to year. That's our sort of long-term planning for our staffing needs and ability to respond to emergent issues that might pop up through inspections and things like that. So we're a little bit leaner this year than we were last year. And then on the MARC program, the growth there again is bringing in another year of our commitment to the Frederick Douglass Tunnel program. Any questions before I move on?
I had a question on the last slide about the 5th bus division property acquisition. Just to clarify, is that to actually execute a transaction, you'll fully control the property, or is it due diligence to get to that point?
It is, our hope is that we'll fully be able to acquire and take ownership of a property. We have,
but no starting improvements, but full control.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Where did the lots go up?
Oh, the lots locally operated transit, they've been successful in receiving some discretionary grants. So those are now shown in our budget. Those are pass-through grants for some of the discretionary awards they've seen. The formula funding for lots is quite stable. So a lot of our FY31 budget is the next year of some of these long multi-year commitments like light rail modernization. We elevator and escalator and vehicle replacements. These are year over year things that come in and represent a large portion of the new year coming into the CTP. In addition to that, we do have about $18.5 million allocated to new state of good repair projects for the core modes. So we shared these with you when we presented on the draft CTP. These are the same things they've held through draft to final. The largest there is on the metro system, some fire protection, contact rail, really critical, unsung, not necessarily headline news types of projects, but important things that we're able to do and chip away at in this budget. This slide shows how our CTP compares to the capital needs inventory that we put out earlier this year. The green bars are the annual funding levels in the CTP, and the multicolored bars are our state of good repair and enhancement needs from the capital needs inventory by mode. So you can see that our budget is tracking fairly closely to our needs over the next several years. And then the delta between the green bar and the multicolored bar is our unmet needs at this point. Shifting over to the operating budget, our total operating budget is $1.386 billion for FY27. You can see that broken down by the bus modes versus rail modes versus statewide and administration there. The largest increase, as Holly was mentioning a moment ago, is in the administration line. That's really representing the increase for Purple Line police positions that we're requesting. And then across the other modes, primarily just annual increases in staffing costs, contractual commitments. We are also requesting 5 additional apprentice positions. We started an apprenticeship program 2 years ago, so we're continuing it and looking to build on that success a little bit. And this is just a look back at the last several years of operating budget. You see that growth there was, along the lines of the conversation earlier. This is sort of keeping pace with contractual commitments, the regional and national economy, inflation, things like that. And then some very targeted growth where we've been able to add critical operator positions. And this year we're looking to add the Purple Line positions, things like that. Just wrapping up, our focus is making sure that MTA is ready to deploy all of the dollars available to us. We know that those needs are there. So our job is to make sure we deploy them. We do have some challenges, some real challenges this year that we're working through. The cyber attack last August was a real setback. Losing access to all sorts of systems and diverting the agency's attention to that sort of management of that situation. Is ongoing. We do have access to essentially all of our project files again at this point, so things are back on track, but there was disruption. And then there was also an interim final rule issued by the federal government in October related to the disadvantaged business enterprise programs, which has affected a number of our capital projects that are in various stages of procurement. So we're seeing some project delays as we respond that issue as well. So we are doing what's in our control to monitor our expenditures and adapt our program to make sure we're doing the best that we can to still deploy all the dollars that we have to project needs. And then continuing to focus on state of good repair, safety critical work. This includes our light rail modernization program. We've already mentioned several times just our real enthusiasm about the progress on the Metro rail car project. That's continuing. Light rail modernization program. We have contracts in market for the new vehicles, signal system, station upgrades, and traction power substations. The maintenance facility will follow shortly. And a couple other noteworthy pieces of progress or milestones on safety critical work. We had a metro secondary breakers refurbishment and electrical equipment rehabilitation projects that reached BPW approval just this month. These things really are hard-won progress. It takes a long time to get these projects to these milestones. These are projects that advertised back in July of 2024, and we're now hitting the point of getting our NTPs and being able to get that work started, which we're excited to do. So that's what I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Since it became an interest of mine last year, how are we doing on TPSS?
Good. So we received bids recently, proposals, and we're working through the evaluation process. So far, so good.
I have a,
We're moving as fast as we can.
No expectation.
I just, can you go back to a couple slides, the one that's final CTP SGR funded projects? Yeah. So we don't, have to do this in excruciating detail now, but maybe you can follow it. So the FY, I think, what I have in front of me, the FY 31 MTA CTP number is about $722 million. Does that sound?
Sounds about
right? So whatever, that's right. So I'm just trying to relate that to this. You're saying of that 722, primarily, whatever that means numerically, support ongoing SGR?
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah.
And program support, so staffing needs.
Yeah.
So about 700 million of
Inspections.
that is existing stuff that is already ongoing.
Right.
And then the 18 and a half makes up the difference. So that slide's trying to tell us that for that 700 million-ish dollars, I want to say ish, but I mean seven, whatever the number might be. The vast majority supports ongoing sort of familiar SGR project. And then you've added another 20 million for things that are not currently, what does it mean to say new SGR construction? What does it?
In last year's CTP, we did not have funding for this contact rail project, for this traction motor repair project, for this Clipper Mill grade crossing. Those projects were not funded in last year's CTP. And in this year's CTP, they are funded.
So they're sort of new line items that you wouldn't have found last year.
Yes.
Whereas the other ones, I'm just trying to get this straight.
Yeah.
The other ones in the chunk above it, you would have found them last year, and this is just more of, this is the next year of that thing.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Thank you.
But they're also not newly ideated ideas, most likely. These are projects that have been in a hopper, taken out of a hopper, put back in a hopper. Is that fair?
Yes, that's true. And going back to our capital needs inventory, that's our, we have a long list of projects that are past that ideation stage that we're trying to find funding for.
I think just from the work group perspective, right, the project delivery, that again, we all are very aware there's limited resources, but just, there's opportunity cost on top of the hard choices of just how much money is in an operating budget today. And I think that just a recognition that the increases that we're seeing, which, we are thrilled to see, and our trade-offs across all aspects of state government, that at the end of the day, we're still paying more to do what we're doing. And yet people want to see the improvement, people want to see the enhancement, meaning, in particular writers, to get to the point of greater economic impact. But that delta, I think back to John's earlier point, is, we've got to find another source to make that happen.
So for the commission's kind of work in advocacy, it's really about where do you set that bar, right? And is it too low now, or and if it is, what is it that we want?
And I think people see a number that is a growth number and assume that means enhancement and improvement. And I think that's an educational piece that's on us from an advocacy piece of just, this is to just stay where we are requires more spending. And that's tough, but everybody's feeling it. And certainly it's not just a transportation, issue at all.
So how pragmatic do you want to be? How ideological do you want to be? It's kind of the push-pull of this.
I have a question, but are there other questions? And you can go back to Sean's presentation or anything else that we've heard in the last two presentations. So I just want to mention one thing, which is sort of a minor elephant in the room, which is the Be More Bus program. You know, there is in your packet an exchange of letters between me and the administrator, in which I asked on behalf of the commission what additional capital or operating funding, if available in the short term, would most meaningfully accelerate implementation of Be More Bus, what elements could be advanced sooner with targeted incremental funding, including with respect to the 5th Bus Division Downtown Transit Hub, and also what other potential funding or project delivery pathways or strategies might merit near-term consideration. And then there was a response from the administrator, you know, a couple weeks later, whatever. So that was, you know, something I wanted to do to try and figure out. I mean, there is just, I think, I can almost say unprecedented alignment among advocacy groups, whether they're, you know, advocacy groups, business community, elected officials, and on, and us, in that we unanimously supported and endorsed the BRTC plan, the Be More Bus plan. And I think inherent in that endorsement is as quickly as possible, right? I mean, that's sort of the point. It's not, you know, it's not an abstract concept. So obviously the one of the things it is absolutely true, and I give the department credit that in one of these slides, you have to go back and find it, that there's 14 or something $million for the acquisition of the site, which was in the draft and remains, of course, in the final. That was really the only change with regard to Be More Bus. And I think there was a lot of advocacy around enhancing that number by some amount to expedite. You know, and I don't think anybody expected that it was going to be funded in 1 year, just to pick an absurd outcome, or that you could even spend that much money if we gave it, if we had it, you know, if it just sort of, we hit the lottery, so to speak, and put it into the certainly not the budget year, the current year of the CTP. But at the same time, I think there's concern about how quickly we can go. And there's an article this morning, which some of you may have seen in the banner, that describes the reaction and the advocacy reaction from folks in the community, including advocacy groups and elected officials, about the fact that that number has not changed in the final CTP. And I just want to say, you know, I'm really not here to criticize in any way the administration, MDOT, MTA for that absence. And I think that the governor, the secretary, the department has done an amazing job in the last few years after a period of complete negligent, in my view, negligent inattention to this, by what was accomplished last year in state of good repair through the efforts of all sorts of people. You know, we've talked about that today. It's a gigantic sea change. It's a gigantic investment. And, you know, we'll talk in a little bit about HB 517 work group and the potential for some structural reforms in which the legislative branch as well as the executive branch have participated. I'm optimistic we're going to see some changes there. So we're really on, I think, a great path. And I guess what I want to say is I'm not going to be critical of that decision not to include it in the final CTP, but it is not going to stop me and should not stop us for advocating for additional funds for Be More Bus throughout whatever lays ahead of us. I think that is what we agreed to do when we unanimously agreed to support Be More Bus. It's frankly what the statute that created the BRTC says we're supposed to be doing. And so I think we need to keep doing it. I'm not going to pile on. And like I said, I'm truly grateful for all the work that has been done to sort of move us in the right direction. But we have such consensus around this. The bus fleet, the bus program, as we know, is 80%, that's the number, isn't it? 80% of MTA riders. The return on investment potential is gigantic. So I just want us to stay focused on doing everything that we can do to expedite the implementation of Be More Bus. So I just wanted to say that, and certainly if other people have thoughts about it, feel free. I know we're going to be hearing more about it, and we're just going to have to work together to figure out how to expedite continued investment. So those are my thoughts. Any other questions on the budget? There's also, by the way, I think people have seen it, but there's a January 20th letter, which I think was, I know was sent to you by Don. It was just the response to the commission on our comments on the CTP generally. I think you've seen it, but just for public, so it's in the record, January 20th letter back from the acting secretary, sort of saying, thanks for your letter. It's about 2 pages of feedback and information. So I call your attention to that as well. Okay. Don.
So we can either jump to the department on the floor here, and then sitting up here. Talk about their departmental bills and then move into the watch list I created of bills.
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Hey, good morning, members of the BRTC. My name is Matt Michael. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at the Secretary's Office with MDOT. So, just appreciate the opportunity to come and brief you today on our departmental bills. I want to go through first a few key dates of interest. The one that's not up here, just as a flag, is the bill request guarantee date, which happens to be today. So anything requested today will be prepared for the introduction deadlines. That would be the 9th in the Senate and 13th in the House. That would guarantee a bill hearing date. I will say that all the bills I'll be discussing today, all departmental bills, have already been introduced in one house or another. So MDOT has a package of 9 departmental bills under consideration. We're also working on the governor's housing bill, the TOD bill from that. Just a couple selections from our 9-bill package. The increased revenue bond cap for MDTA. This would raise the ability to issue outstanding revenue bonds from $4 billion by the end of the fiscal year to $5 billion. And this additional capacity is just to continue ongoing capital needs work while creating capacity for Francis Scott Key Bridge reconstruction prior to any reimbursements we would receive. Now, notably, just in terms of fiscal responsibility, this does not change any of the coverage ratios associated with these bonds. It just increases the cap for issuance. Additionally, I want to highlight the legislative component of our Serious About Safety program that was announced in 2025. We have 2 automated speed enforcement bills and then one that deals with ignition interlock. Going briefly through those, the speed monitoring system safety corridor bill is one you may be familiar with from prior year. It's a reintroduction of the 2025 bill, would authorize the State Highway Administration to utilize speed enforcement, automated speed enforcement on corridors that are identified as particularly hazardous for vulnerable road users. This is, of course, subject to a federal identification process, federal standards. Some highlights and differences from the 2025 bill. We did adopt privacy provisions that were in a bill from Senator Love from 2025 with regard to data. Added the tiered fine structure, which was also passed in 2025. So it's tiering fines relative to speed over the 11 mile per hour threshold. But I wanted to highlight the work that we'd be doing with local jurisdictions on this front. So the bill requires that before any cameras go in on SHA's part, we'd have to consult with the locals, make sure we're not duplicating any efforts relative to, say, school zone programs or residential cameras that may be in the vicinity. But if a jurisdiction has an operable camera program, they would have the authority to then come onto the state roadways and camera subject to the conditions of their program. How that would work out is we would then permit the use of the cameras on our system. Keeping with the ASE context, we have an enforcement reciprocity bill. Now, what that's doing is looking to create authority similar to what MDTA has for toll reciprocity enforcement. The MVA administrator could engage local partners in her interjurisdictional agreements for speed camera and red light camera violations. So the issue that we have now is, if you have an out-of-state individual, they get dinged by one of these cameras, it's payable. They don't choose to pay. There's really no teeth to the enforcement mechanism, and this would allow the home jurisdiction to flag on behalf of the Maryland violation. Then moving on to the ignition interlock enrollment. This is actually a pretty simple bill, but a little bit of background to it. So if you are under 21, you have a alcohol restriction on your license. If you make a poor decision, drive while intoxicated, you get basically one DUI, the other being a violation of that restriction. You can either have your license suspended or choose to engage in the ignition interlock program. Now, if you're 21 or older, to waive that suspension or to modify that suspension, you have to go through an administrative law judge hearing, which the under 21 individuals don't have to. It's an additional administrative burden. We don't really see a reason for that disparity. So we're looking to remove that and help move people into the ignition interlock program faster. And we know there's probably a couple bills of interest to the BRTC, so focus on those next. We're gonna go a little out of order, start with our prioritization bill and then land with the TOD bill. So as for what we're calling the prioritization bill, but in truth and full name, the Transportation Investment Priorities Act of 2026, this is the reintroduction of last year's prioritization funding bill or Chapter 30 bill. The audience, for those who don't know, I'm sure the BRTC is familiar with this. The background here is Training Commission had recommended that there be an update to the Chapter 30 scoring system used by the department to assess its major transportation projects. And this bill represents the department's response to that and proposed solution. I'll just highlight 4 specific goals of the legislation. First, to amend the CTP letter process and the TOR to ensure that more effective data submission on projects and that there's consistency of response structure. Second, to update the project prioritization process and enhance the transparency overall and clarify how projects get scored, and also clarify responses that locals will get so they know how to better improve those projects. Would reform the Maryland Transportation Commission and provide certain review responsibilities to that commission. And then there's a series of associated changes that help to implement these overall goals. Now, currently, there's a number of measures that are in law that are specific to the scoring. What this looks to do on the project prioritization side is strip back some of that and focus on what are those 6 core goals that we want to score off of. They are bolded on the slide, but just because it can be a little hard to see with all the text, I'll repeat them now. Those are safety, accessibility and mobility, climate change in the environment, social equity, economic development, and land use and transportation demand management. Now, a project would be assessed subject to these 6 goals and then divided by the overall cost of the project. So basically, you're looking at a fairly simple return on investment model for the score. The measures would be reviewed biannually in odd years. If there's a need for any changes to make sure we're aligning with those overall goals and continuing to promote them appropriately, those would be presented to the MTC for review and comment. And then in even years, projects would be considered for addition to the capital construction program. State of good repair projects are an annual occurrence. Finally, I'll end with the Administration's Transit and Housing Opportunity Act of 2026. So this bill builds off of MDOT's 2025 TOD bill. It includes the land use provisions of that bill. So the parking minimum restrictions within a quarter mile of our high quality transit sites, the mixed use by right provision, as we were calling it, and the enhancement of MDOT's authority to develop state-owned lands around transportation facilities. In addition to this, it's looking at some additional items for financing to help make the financing and carrying costs of these projects make sense. You'll note going through the slide, the reference to, and I said it earlier, those high quality transit sites. So what are we talking about there? We're talking about rail transit sites that are served by rail at least once per hour, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 a.m. So if it meets those 4 conditions, that's going to trigger elements of this bill. Now, with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. I do just want to ask for a moment of personal privilege. This is the full MDOT stateside team. They're always available to help you. And actually, now that I say that, I realize we're missing our legislative manager, Trish Westerveld, who some of you have worked with on letters and requesting reports. So again, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Are there questions about the presentation? I'll start with one if people can supplement. Is it possible for you, and the prioritization bill is simplified from last year's, which I think is a good thing, but it's still not uncomplicated. Is it possible for you in a high level to just distinguish this year's bill from last year's bill in terms of what you might be doing differently, what it does or doesn't do? For those of us who were involved in discussions last year about the prioritization, is that possible?
Certainly. So we can also, try to find a way to, include a written overview of those changes.
I think it'd be great if you would, but maybe just a high level or however you could do it.
Absolutely. So some of the major elements, there was a lot of discussion around development and evaluation programs and feasibility studies under the program. So seen as the first step for these projects to get into the program. And this is a result of some concerns based out last year, which we heard from the locals about how do projects get ready for submission and some discomfort around the scoring system and how it would operationally work. What is not in the legislation, the first step would be announcing available funding for the program, for this development and evaluation program. Then included in the legislation is an announcement of the criteria used to select those projects. We issued guidance on the number of projects going to be applied for. What's critical is the locals would have to include requests to enter the program in their priority letter. So you'd prioritize access to it as you would any other project. And then there'd be a selection for these projects where MDOT would help to review the overall project and prepare it to get to the later capital construction phase. Jeff Anderson, also who runs the programs here, may be able to help build off of that piece.
Sure. And thanks, John, for the question. So I think in my mind, some of the big differences are there's a small wording change, but an important one that basically says MDOT, it clarifies MDOT will be funding the feasibility studies. And that was one of the sort of big, I think, points of confusion last year was that you need a feasibility study to get your project scored. People were worried that suddenly they were on the hook for funding feasibility studies on state facilities. And that was never the intention. And so we've made a wording change in the legislation to clarify that. I think some of the other big differences, we did have, I think, a much more extensive treatment of asset management issues last time that we basically decided we can deal with those administratively. It is kind of making the bill a lot more convoluted than it needs to be. So we removed a bunch of that stuff. And then I think, as Matt alluded to as well, trying to clarify that the project development design portion of the program actually has two parts. The first part gets a project from sort of a concept to 10 to 15% design. And that is what people generally think of as a feasibility study. The second part is taking that design from 15% all the way through ready to construction. And so breaking that up, changing the definition so that initial project development is clear. And then, as Matt said, providing a clear pathway for making that request, and that kind of going hand in hand with being clear that we're the ones who are going to fund that. We're the ones who are going to execute it.
And if I can add to that, to what Jeff said, in the background, Jeff and his team have also been working very hard with stakeholders on working groups and other items to kind of, because there's two sides of legislation. There's the text and, there's obviously the large interpersonal part.
Sure. As I said earlier, it's an odd day for us because our local folks aren't here because of snow stuff. And I know you've been probably working with some of those folks, the ones who are not here, some are here. Just one quick question based on what you said. If MDOT is going to do the feasibility studies, for scoring purposes, does that mean that every local jurisdiction is entitled to do feasibility studies on MDOT's nickel by saying we want to do a feasibility study, or is there a discretionary process at MDOT for doing a feasibility study, which then puts you in a scoring mechanism, et cetera, et cetera?
That was an excellent anticipatory question, because in the CTP that we just released, we basically said there are $10 million available in this year's CTP for feasibility studies. When localities request feasibility studies through their priority letters, we will then, through an internal panel, take a look at those and figure out how far does $10 million go, which of these can we fund, and we're also going to be obviously making the criteria that we're going to be using transparent for sort of how are those being selected, and that's going to be the process.
I mean, I guess, not to dig too deep in this, but I guess it's possible that you are pre-scoring the scoring in the sense that if you say, well, there's not money for a feasibility study for that, then you're sort of saying it's not going to advance. Is that too?
There certainly. So I think there are two kind of routes at that point. One is obviously we want to talk to people and say, you know, here's the basis upon which we're selecting which feasibility studies to do, and it's based on things like state data around where congestion is, where crashes are taking place, where safety issues are, and other things. It's based on local priorities. It's, you know, here's basically the basis. And we are going to be providing, I think, opportunities if people want to basically say, well, if MDOT can't fund it this year, we have the capacity locally to fund it. And then what we want to do is kind of work closely with jurisdictions who decide to go that route to make sure that what happens now sometimes doesn't happen in the future, which is people say, oh, I did this great study. And we say, well, that's not how we would have done it. Can you change it around? So we want to be able to provide that kind of guidance and work closely with people so that if they do advance a study, you know, on their own, that it is in fact ready to go from our perspective.
And Jeff, is the idea that the scope of that study would be mutually agreed upon by the local jurisdiction and MDOT, so that you don't have a, well, why'd you do that study? You should have done this study sort of question?
Yeah, in both directions, if whether MDOT is doing it or whether the local is doing it. I think the idea is, you know, if you submit a project as a locality saying we want a feasibility study for this particular roadway or for this potential transit route, we would then come talk to you and say, all right, here's how we're thinking about doing the feasibility study. Does that scope seem right? Here are the kind of range of alternatives that we'd be thinking about. Does that much match what you're thinking?
My last question.
No,
I know this is highly context dependent, but just because I don't really know anything about this professionally, how much does what's the range of cost of a feasibility study such as the ones we're describing?
Well, as you can imagine, it depends on the project. Yeah. So the range, I would say, is probably, and there are more expert people than I to give this, but off the top of my head, I'd say 500 to 2 million, 500,000 to 2 million. You know, with the caveat that, you know, obviously a major project is going to be well beyond.
Yeah, more. No, I understand. Yeah. Right.
I have a question.
Yes,
on
please.
the TOD. How, either a ballpark or you might have already identified the specific number, given the walls of, you know, the rail 1 time an hour, 8 to, you know, how many sites is that?
I'm trying to recall how many sites that is. I might have to get back to you on that. I can talk to you in terms of the acreage that is in question.
I'm just curious, order of magnitude, right? Or are we talking 3 sites? Are we talking 30 sites? I mean, I'm just kind of curious. Because I mean, those specific qualifications, I think, makes the geography pretty distinct pretty quickly. So I was just curious in terms of the ability to have a catalytic economic impact, which is certainly how I see TOD. Just kind of what scale we're talking about.
So it's far more than 3 sites. It's a fair number along the Mark Penn Line corridor meet that. There's a number of sites in Baltimore City that would meet that criteria.
I mean, it should be essentially all of the Penn Line.
Yes.
Light rail.
And Metro. Plus obviously the Metro rail stations in Montgomery.
There is a
But I mean, just because it is broader, it's not just MTA.
As I'm sure some of you know, particularly obviously at MDOT and TA, the state is working on a strategic plan for TOD in the Baltimore region. It's not a secret. It's been socialized. They've been socializing it with local jurisdictions in particular, who obviously have to meet the state on land use and other kinds of issues. So that is in process. I suspect will be finalized by our next meeting-ish, I hope. So when that is done, I've asked, we've already had, you may remember David Zayden, I think, came and gave us a brief presentation. But I'm very impressed by MDOT's work on TOD. It's very focused and sophisticated and is starting to return real results. You probably have seen the number of either joint development proposal awards or other awards that MDOT has been doing, I think, and RFPs that are going out. So at our next meeting, I hope, we will have MDOT, David presumably back again or whomever, to really present the strategic plan for TOD, which is so directly related to all of these transit stations that we are responsible for in one way or another. So, I've been very impressed by what I've seen so far. I think the commission will benefit greatly from seeing it. It'll answer Lakey because it's got, maps and dots and questions and rankings and ratings and so on. I think it'll start to.
Well, that goes to kind of the core of my question. Having worked on this in other municipalities, other states, just the idea of you can have, thresholds that meet buffers based on those qualifications, but what is the prioritization to start to get it towards becoming actually catalytic, where you attract, joint development, private sector partners? So it sounds like that would address kind of that core question. The other thing I just wanted to flag, just as a thought, is enterprise zones are included here. The movement at the federal level with opportunity zones just feels like something that would easily align and give an additional layer of funding that would have access. That I know there are other kind of groups looking at opportunity zones and making sure the state legislature is informed on that. So there's an ability there just to have some real fluidity and benefit.
Yeah, Don?
I think it's a very complicated bill, as you pointed out, and it goes a long way in transparency and accountability. So kudos, Jeff. And I know it's a heavy, heavy lift from my experience. I would suggest, though, that it might be helpful for the commission to have a small work session to kind of understand some of the details, dive into the details on this particular, because I think it's something that, as I said, is very complicated. Will have impacts on the local.
Yeah, that's a fine idea. Let's work on organizing that. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks, thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, what are we doing? More
Yeah, we're
legislative?
gonna continue on in the theme, and I put together a list of projects that when session opened, when using the pre-files, what was already in the hopper, and have been monitoring it since. And I sent out a list a week or so ago. This thing is going to be kind of a work in progress. It's going to be it iterates, are obviously right, because of the session. It's going to change. So your indulgence there is very helpful. Find it. Here is a copy of the list as I've kind of begun to assemble it.
This is in your packets somewhere.
Yes, and this is not very viewable here. I'm gonna try again, sorry.
We can just follow along if you prefer.
Yeah, it's more for the folks online.
I understand.
Well, hopefully they can see. Okay, so HB 5 is a part of several bills. HB 5, HB 235, and HB 259. HB 235 and HB 259 are departmental bills, not MDOT department, but DHCD and DLR. But this is these are tools, right? Financing tools. In a time when money is precious and state money is especially precious, and we're hearing all about that in the news and in Indianapolis, trying to figure out a way to find money is particularly important. These three bills are new market tax credit program, and a neighborhood business development program reform, and Maryland Community Investment Venture Fund and financial regulations. These three bills kind of represent an opportunity for other people's money, a way to kind of bring money into particularly TOD is what I was thinking. That's why they're on this list, as an opportunity perhaps for the department to work with these others to see whether or not there's a tool there that can be used to help finance TOD projects around the state. HB 18 is the TNC, Transportation Network Operator Minimum Payment Bill. It establishes statewide a per mile, per minute, per trip compensation for TNC drivers, trying to ensure fair wages and predictable earnings for those in the gig economy. HB 58 is an interjurisdictional paratransit route bill. It requires counties to coordinate paratransit routes across borders to identified health facilities. There's 6, I believe, of those. Hopkins, a notable one here. Reduces service gaps for seniors and people with disabilities. Improves efficiency by aligning service planning across jurisdictions. Supports continuity of care by linking provider networks. But it is unfunded. So it's something that is going to be a mandate on the locally operated transit systems and something to watch. HB 78 is a property tax subclass for land versus improvements. It's a kind of, again, another TOD focused bill to at least think about from our perspective here. HB 99, Annex Land Use and Density Authority, another TOD type bill, adjustment municipal authority to set land use and densities on newly annexed land. It's kind of a bill to try and rationalize that. Again, something to think about where there's annexations and TOD. HB 110 is a school bus seatbelt requirement bill. Requires 3-point seat belts on all newly purchased school buses after 2030. This is the yellow bus issue, and seems like a reasonable idea, but again, the cost is unknown. HB 229. You heard about earlier. That's the authorities bill, Transportation Authority Revenue Bond Limit Increase bill. Just heard about that from the department. HB 230, the prioritization bill we just talked about.
HB 235 is that Neighborhood Business Development Program Reform Bill. That's a DHCD departmental. Removes the requirements for local government's approval for certain DHCD financial assistance, streamlines access to capital for small businesses and disinvested areas, reduces administrative barriers that slow down revitalization projects, supports faster deployment for state economic development resources, enhances flexibility for DHCD to respond to the community needs. It's a small business bill. Again, something to consider as a tool around TOD. HB 239 is the Starter and Silver Homes Act of 2026. That's a DHCD bill. It's a governor-backed bill. Limits local zoning restrictions on lot sizes and setbacks. Designed for single-family homes. HB 243 is a comprehensive and general plan requirement bill. I believe it's an MDP departmental bill. It's a huge bill, changing comprehensive plan elements, including the transportation element. Huge bill, complicated bill. I don't know where this one came from personally, but something to watch. HB 256, Vulnerable Road User Protection Act of 2026. Vulnerable road users include transit riders, because most transit riders are pedestrians at some point. Tracking this one, I think, is important. It's an SHA bill, SHA targeted bill. We talked about, I mentioned HB 259. That's the Maryland Community Investment Venture Fund and Financial Regulations. This is a DLLR, or a dollar departmental bill. It eliminates certain fees on banking, expands, updates Maryland Community Investment Venture Fund. Perhaps another tool for TOD financing. I would say that in those three bills, HB 259, HB 5, and HB 235, there's really no mention of TOD in any of that, or there's some mention of sustainable communities, but no mention of TOD. HB 263, early voting centers, bus stop access. Good idea to use transit to go vote. Seems like a good idea, one to watch. And Senate.
It's slightly more complicated.
Yeah, okay, all right. So it requires.
Conversations with the locals yesterday.
Yeah, is that right? It requires local bus systems to allow boarding and alighting at early voting centers within half mile of a route, improves voter access, supports equitable participation, and there is an operational burden on local jurisdictions.
Yeah, I think the idea is great, just the implementation is one that we want to.
It's another one like HB 58, there's no money. And finally, SB Senate Bill 59, that's the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act of 2026. This is a refile from last year. It updated and refiled version. They're not identical, but they are the same bill conceptually. 2026 version is the successor, obviously. It requires an impact assessment for major highway expansion projects, mandates multimodal mitigation strategies to offset highway impacts. Big impact to building roads across the state, and again, one to watch. So that's the list I have at the moment. There are a few obvious things that I know are going to drop and haven't yet, but this is the list as I now have it. I appreciate any advice on things that I missed and things that I probably should be following or should be following. So
great, thank you. Let me ask let's see. Let me ask MDOT, the legislative team, one of the things that's come up, and Don's mentioned this to me previously, and he said it today, things that do or don't have a TOD or a transit connection that might. So I hope that the department is looking at other legislation, whether it's coming from sister departments. And I know you're working closely with DHCD on governor's package, but when you have a bill that sort of says, we're going to advantage or encourage or do something, we'd like that to include somehow a TOD, sort of bonus. You know what I mean? I'm not saying this very clearly, but the idea of the TOD bill, of course, is that there are certain advantages given to TOD sites and certain special considerations. So I just wonder if you're scanning the bills to say, can we get a little TOD public policy in there to sort of help achieve multiple goals at one time? So,
I mean, I can speak on Matt's behalf. I know from MTA, we have a legislative team and they take a look at every bill, whether it's transit specific or not. We meet on a weekly basis to review. Then my team gets with Matt's team and all of the other legislative teams who've done the same thing so that they can take a look at every bill to see, do we have a position?
I guess, TOD just is sort of an obvious, it's not just, please come up. It's not just TOD, but I mean, that's just a good example, and partly because Don's mentioned it a few times, where you have a bill that gives an economic benefit, creates a zone, creates a district, creates an incentive. Where it's appropriate, can we sort of say, yeah, and if you do transit stuff, if you do TOD stuff, that might be a way to sort of combine some.
Yes, certainly. So beyond obviously our legislative package, we usually review about 700 bills each year, and we're looking for things just like that. Areas both, where we think there's maybe a need to move or help align with department processes, but also where we can amplify some of our other efforts. So
fair enough. I mean, I'm assuming that's the case, but I just want to.
Oh, absolutely.
And I will say, I did reach out to the department on HB 5.
The new markets bill.
Yeah, the new.
The other thing I wanted to mention, which is Don did not cover, and admittedly, it's not a bill yet, but it will be, is the implementation of the HB 517 work group. Everybody here knows about that. At some point, there'll be another bill number, and then we're going to figure out how to not call it the HB 517 bill because it'll be extremely confusing to people. It'll have some actual number this year, but that hasn't been introduced yet, but it's coming clearly. And hopefully, because there was consensus, thanks to a lot of people, including Mr. Winkler, who was the lead staff and coordinator and scribe and drafter of that report. There'll be a lot of consensus around it, and because there was consensus around it, I think at the work group, and it'll be a bill that we can push forward to change, as I said earlier, some governance things that I think the work group thought were really important to affect MTA. So we'll certainly let you know, it just doesn't exist yet as a piece of legislation because it hasn't been introduced. And to that end, I'm just sort of reminded to ask someone I'm sure knows, what are the dates, the drop dead dates for introduction other than special considerations?
The 13th. The 9th for the Senate, the 13th for the House. Those are the bill introduction deadline dates. Those will guarantee a hearing. Obviously, if something comes in after that, you still get a hearing. It's just going to go to rules first.
Okay, questions on all that, on what Donna's presented or any other legislative matters? Just because we have a couple little items we want to make sure we cover on the legislative leave behind and newsletter and so on, but questions specifically about legislation? Okay. Don, do you want to talk about the collateral materials and other?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Jake to come up.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And while he's getting that up, procedurally kind of flipped on the agenda that I'm going to cover the newsletter first and then the legislative flyer second.
And if you'll just introduce yourself for the
folks
watching at home.
The slide will as well, but I'm Jake Shutt, Transit Planner and Policy Analyst, part of the three-person staff of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission.
Which one is it?
The one that says presentation flyer. January on the side. Probably the newest one too.
Yeah.
And another procedural thing, I did pop in 3 links into the chat for those who are watching online or are multitasking online, both the newsletter and the campaign. Yeah. So really, this is an update of the presentation I gave about the newsletter in November, which was right before we rolled it out. Now we're three editions in. The January edition was released on January 12th, about a week and a half ago on a Monday. The publishing date is generally the second Monday of the month that we kind of arbitrarily decided on. And just to bring people up with some of the important content that's probably of interest to this audience as well is some of the big commission news, which we have the December news on the left-hand side and the newest January news on the right-hand side, and things like covering the fact we have a new commissioner appointed and sort of welcoming her and kind of rolling out the general high-level CV on herself. Also in December, we brought attention to the 2 sort of public-facing deliverables that the BRTC put out, both the annual legislative report as well as the BRTC comment letter on the draft CTP, and kind of providing easy access to all of that. For January rather, covered and celebrated the rail car event that that was in the Transit Hub News, but yeah, BRTC staff and commissioners were all in attendance at that, and we thought it was newsworthy to our audience, as well as giving people a high-level summary of the funding priorities campaign, as well as access to that link that will be the focus of the second half of this presentation. And the legislative roundup is also very important to this. And again, we have the December news items on the left, and we have the January on the right. And consistently in both covering the HB 517 work group, providing access to the website, as well as then once the report came out, obviously the relevancy to our Baltimore Regional Transit system, as well as the commission itself and my job. And then also giving a little bit of attention to the TAM legislative reception that happened, and access to that for people who want to know. And then also celebrating and giving a little bit of information about the new acting secretary of the Maryland Department of Transportation, which is certainly impactful to the transit system and the BRTC's work. And we host this thing on Public Input, which is the engagement site that generally is used at the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. And you can get audience analytics. So I'm just going to briefly go over some of those and kind of see how things are developing with the newsletter now that we're 3 issues in. On the top, I'm listing the November issue, which of course was a debut. On the bottom, the numbers are from the January newest one, but really the trends that you see in January pretty much happened once we got to December. So representative of that, just kind of what the debut was compared to what we kind of settled in as the current normal. One thing, overall, the recipients went down a little bit, but that was really in response to targeting the mailing list better, that we had a number of unsubscribes, it shows what people choosing. And then also we had a lot more email bounces back, and kind of then looking to prune the mailing list a little bit to make it more effective for subsequent distributions. It also provides a metric for each campaign that they call it, for the number of times that the newsletter is actually opened. It gets to people's inbox, but then it's the time that people actually click on the email. We all know how cluttered inboxes are and how many things we actually choose to click on. And it provides the unique number of clicks, or the overall number of clicks, and then the unique recipients that actually click on it. And in both cases, that's down in absolute numbers and proportion. Really chalk that up to the debut novelty, and maybe looking at ways to maybe fine tune content and make it a little bit more sticky, get more people to open it. But yeah, it went down from about 60% to about 40%, all things being equal with the people that get the newsletter. I will say the 40% metric, though, is pretty common for the newsletters that come from public input from the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. So, not really aberrantly out of line. We probably had a higher than average open on the debut issue that one would expect with something new. And then it also gives the clicks, which is the number of times that people, we provide a number of links as seen to, various documents, various other web pages. And that's the number of times that people click. And then the unique is the number of times people click on particular links. And overall, in the absolute numbers, you're seeing a little bit of a drop there. But when you consider the mailing list went down from around 750 to about 650 from the first to subsequent issues, really proportionately, it's kind of holding strong. And when you think about the fact that we went down from a 60% opening to a 40% opening once we put out subsequent, it shows that the audience that we do have in is opening this is continuing to engage with the clicks and really actually look at the stuff. So, our audience is getting potentially maybe a little more selective, but those that are using it as a resource are in fact using it and engaging with it. And it's kind of interesting too that you can actually get into what the stories are that people were clicking on. This is just the clicks from January that were more than 5 of the various things that we directed people to. And as you can see, the HB 517 report, once it came out, definitely got some engagement with 12 people looking at that. The banner, as far as the Transit Hub News, where we picked 4 regional stories to highlight every single issue. The banner story on the school busing issue that's of course been ongoing, got the most clicks out of the stories that we presented. Got some extra people driven to the TAM legislative reception page to get some priorities on, to get some more information on that. And then both the public input link and the Google Drive link are both associated with the advocacy campaign. And what is that? We got 15 people that bothered to look at that. So, definitely got some more access to that. And in fact, for the December edition that we put out, for the links that we had for the BRTC's draft CTP letter and then the legislative report, we had a total of 39 people who actually accessed those. So it definitely boosted the signal on those particular documents. Even more interestingly, you can actually see this is organized from January of the most clicks per page by user. And, it's pretty interesting that we actually do have decision makers looking. Specifically, JB Jennings took a fair amount of interest in the last edition from Maryland, Baltimore and Hartford County. Also, we had Shelley Hedeman, or at least her staff, looking at the newsletter and some of the links, and also from Baltimore County, and importantly on the Budget and Taxation Committee. As well as we also have one of Governor Moore's deputy chiefs of staff looking at it. And I promise I didn't put those 2 in just to drive up the stats for my newsletter, but I'm on there too. And lastly, just kind of looking, I mentioned the unsubscribes and bounces, and the top figures are from the November, the debut issue, the most recent on the bottom. And yeah, the unsubscribes went way down. In fact, we had 0 unsubscribes in December. So people aren't actively trying to get away from our newsletter as much. And yeah, the mailing list is being tuned in a little bit better, such that the email bounces are definitely less percentage-wise and in real numbers. Oh, and do want to mention, we're continuing to want to build the audience for this. We think it does have a lot of great information. So, any other ideas or way that this can be forwarded, forward this around to your email. If you think it's people who'd be interested, they can very easily sign up on their own through the widget. And open to any other ideas to kind of spread the distribution of this.
Jake, this is extraordinarily good work and the content is excellent. Obviously, the numbers are relatively small. I think we want to try and boost them. What I would ask you to do is to think about a sort of a to-do list of what we might do to do that, and also to figure out a way to reach out to the commission and to other stakeholders for their own suggestions, including some specific suggestions like, please do this, please send this to you, please post this on social, whatever you think is appropriate. And to the extent that folks on the commission want to spend a half an hour on a Zoom call or something with you to give you some ideas, because this really is high quality content, and obviously you want to reach as many people as possible. So I'll leave it to you and Don to sort of think through that, but let's figure out how to have some expansion as quickly as we, especially with the session. I don't know, for example, if we send it to all legislators, I know that I know that they get a blizzard. But if you don't start with that denominator, you're not going to get any numerator. So we've got to make sure we're doing all of this.
Yeah, I collected a mailing list of well over a state and well over 100 state and then local officials. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are how many delegates plus senators? 140 something plus 43 So 147, so that's a couple, anyway, you know what I'm saying, so let's figure it out. Let's do that as soon as we reasonably can, especially if it has any impact on what people might see as part of this session.
Absolutely. Love to have more ideas on that, so. Okay, then the newer, this really spun out of the last meeting that we had here at the BRTC. We had covered the draft Consolidated Transportation Program letter and had a discussion with that. And Commissioner Spencer suggested that we look at a way to make it more digestible and plain language for people. I mean, the letter was great and gets at a lot of the points, but to maybe go in kind of a more concise manner with it and, really emphasizing the plain language. So I started working on that and working with the BRTC leadership and our staff to look at the ways to best present that information, and came up with a flyer that I designed on InDesign. And this is a copy of it, and there's also more copies of it out on the table where people sign up if you want to take some out. Great way to win friends and influence people. So in any case, the front page of the flyer, really, I mean, we try to keep the messages pretty targeted, and certainly that, transit is just absolutely vital to the Baltimore region. And that really, maybe Baltimore is a little bit unique as far as East Coast metro areas and the sheer number of people and how important the bus system is, and that it's really the backbone of the system in so many ways, and why it might not be as sexy as rail transport, but why it is so important that it gets the support. And that really, we have amazing transit plans out there, especially some that have come out in the last year. Kudos to MTA for all that great work. But, these visions and ways that they do have to improve the transit system don't really amount to much if we don't really get the supporting funding for them. So just kind of laying that out on the front page. On the back page of the flyer, we get into a little bit more information, a little bit more wordy, if you will. And, really trying to identify those critical investments, the importance of the better bus facilities, with the fact that it isn't such an important transit mode around here, the need for the new facilities that are going to support that plan. Also, of course, that clear path to the red line, and just, that the planning is largely there, but to really be thinking about the funding and how to move that forward in a proactive way. Just keeping the rail and bus system really reliable, that stayed a good repair, that we've had so many great developments as far as the new metro cars, the light rail modernization moving forward, but emphasize that to the public and our decision makers about how important it is to not get into a hole with those sort of issues. And then we end it with, ask for our state representatives, and also, I guess, kind of talking points for the public that wants to support this or other advocates. And just the important need for the robust capital funding. And again, these amazing transit plans that we have ready to go on the shelf don't happen if we don't get the funding for those capital investments. But at the same time, stressing the need for the operations funding to keep the existing services healthy and reliable, as well as supporting them once we bring new services into line. And really prioritizing the high impact investments, particularly talking about the Be More Bus system. And with the good news that we've heard about the final CTP, about the supporting the 5th Bus Division light rail modernization, clearly this advocacy campaign has been a tremendous success in a week and a half. And lastly, then we have a QR code on the back that then people can very easily go to a supporting website, which is really an idea that our chair really brought up, and also a good way to further spread the information and reinforce it and have it in different formats. This isn't really how the appearance looks on the website, but really getting information that's in a portrait format into the old landscape of a PowerPoint, and really on the top, it kind of starts out with fairly brief ways that really support and echo the same messages that we have on the flyer. And with anything like this in a political sort of advocacy campaign aimed at the public and legislatures, to really kind of keep it in concise points that are repeated and fairly brief and concise. Also a little bit more on the website about sort of the calls to action of ways that people can support this, and what we're asking the state leaders to do, but then just also ideas for people who are elected officials, but also just the general public who would like to, who are just boosters of transit, who are riders, who just know the importance of it for our entire community, and being able to direct people back to the flyer then if they want to distribute that at all, share it on social media, print it out, give it to people, what have you. And then we kind of end it with a little bit more wonky depth, if you will, but just kind of more information about the CTP, which Which, yeah, I have consolidated transportation plan on there. I just updated that this morning, as well as pointing the link to the final CTP now that's out. Then also providing more depth of information, the BRTC's previously mentioned comment letter on the CTP, as well as the Be More Bus letter that's also been referred to in the meeting if people want to access it. And then below that on the actual website for people, again, who want to dive in more, and with this being directed at elected officials as well as very interested members of the general public, directing people to some of the great MTA plans out there and other web pages that kind of go into more depth about all of these projects. And yeah, that's what we've been doing so far to kind of bridge this stuff more from government to government communications, which are important, but also the general public and advocates.
Well, again, thanks. This is, I mean, it really, the content is really excellent and the integration is also excellent. We just have to figure out what to do with it to make it useful. So I would appreciate if people here could think about that. Jake, are you going to make these available, these hard copies available to the commission in some form? I'm not sure.
I believe they're in the folder, and there's also about 40 out there. So yeah.
Right. We're ultimately going to need, I think we should plan to give people some, I don't know how many you have or how easy they are to produce, but we should make sure people have at least some number of them to for their travels, so to speak.
Okay.
And again, you know, with the session upon us, figuring out how to ramp up this sort of comms effort as quickly as possible would really be great. So opportunity for questions or comment. Lakey, please.
I know we talked about this last year, so I think even just having something physical and then the ability to point to a website is a vast improvement. I just want to put forward that, and I'm always wearing my economic development hat because at the end of the day, that's what is, community development. So I really question, maybe we need a second. And so even in looking at this, I'm thinking, the back stays the same, but the front of this to me reads as the half of the argument that is about resident service and all the priorities that we have around that. So I was positing, just back in the envelope, if you were to have 3 buckets that read a little bit more towards economic impact. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's business growth, the ability to have workforce and customers get to you. It's about real estate, meaning enhancing value, improving value, creating perhaps catalytic development back to our, TOD. And then it's reducing traffic in the vein of thinking about people returning to office, but also the ability to get to whether it's entertainment or healthcare, kind of big destination uses, particularly that sit in the city of Baltimore. It's the other half of the same argument. So I would just say that perhaps we just make a second one and, you could use the exact same format. I was attempting to get into 3 buckets, but I think that this is a great improvement. And to John's point, I think the leave behind as we approach thinking about advocacy and being able to leave it with someone. But I feel like some of what is on this current version falls in line with what people think they already understand about the need for transit and their ability to distance from that and not the shared holistic value from an economic standpoint, which I think just breaks through barriers in different ways than some of this messaging might.
And I mean, if you have those, if you come up with those 3 points, you kind of want to, get some of the language going. I'm glad to start making proofs on that. It'd be pretty easy to drop in that information there, especially if it's about the same length and you're looking at 3 points, probably switch out the pictures to something that would align with that a little bit better. But yeah, be glad to do that. Would have time.
That's a really good point. Thank you. Great point. Yeah. Okay, other questions? So I would ask folks, let's figure out a way, and you guys are gonna have to take the lead to follow up, figure out, but it's an open invitation, obviously, for people to have ideas, thoughts, like Lakey's or others.
Well, and just, we are printing these up in-house and have to do a little bit of trimming with them, so very glad I have time to do that. Ashley ordered us a bunch of new card stock, so we got enough for a couple hundred. But yeah, just kind of let me know quantities, and for people who would be working downtown and it'd be easy to physically drop it off on my work from home days, I'd be glad to make the walk over to your office or something like that as well. So yeah, I'd love to see more eyes get on this material.
Thank you. All right, excellent. Well done. All right, Don, let's return into working group updates. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. We have a lots work group meeting coming up. Marcus, have you
Yeah, thanks, John and Don. Going back to December, we had our last work group update. We have one coming up in February. But Jennifer Bay of Greater Baltimore Community briefed our group on the GBC's role in leading as a leading private sector partner advancing regional economic prosperity. She has a strong emphasis on transportation as a driver of the growth. She highlighted a lot of key initiatives of the Vision 2035 and a lot that went into the Baltimore the Be More bus plan. The briefing also discussed infrastructure advocacies like the Red Line project and the challenges that are associated with it, and sustained coordination with the state, local, and community stakeholders. After all that, we had a back and forth discussion on things that we could do, but also looked at the challenges that we face within our own group, which were related to safety, funding limitations, connectivity gaps, and the need for improved technology. But I thought it was a really robust meeting, and our next one is coming up in February. I want to say the 3rd or the 4th. That we've been meeting about every other month. And Mike Nestor, Trey, Angelica, Sean, and BMC staff have been very helpful in organizing a lot of this stuff that we're coming up with some speakers and just ideas on how we can move forward, especially during this legislative session.
Great, thank you very much. Excellent, great work. Any questions for Marcus? Thank you, Marcus. It's great. Let's keep up the momentum there. Really appreciate your leadership. Don.
We have a ridership experience meeting coming up, at least a smaller version of it with the school board.
Wednesday.
Next week.
Yeah, on Wednesday.
Finally, a chance to meet with a small group of folks and begin talking about that issue.
Right, so just for broader context for folks who might be hearing this for the first time, this is the commission trying to follow up on the now sort of continued drumbeat of struggles that city school kids have getting to schools on public transportation. The commission is not pointing fingers or taking sides or anything like that. We are just trying to figure out what, if anything, can be done, identify the issues, identify the pressure points. MTA has been very willing, cooperative to do. I know that the MTA and schools are meeting regularly anyway, of course, and I think you mentioned earlier the new MOU coming. So it's not like this is new news or a surprise, but I think the commission was concerned about this, felt it was appropriate for us to at least sort of participate in that discussion and see if we can be helpful. So this first meeting is with the major constituencies, I think including Baltimore City, which is not to be forgotten as a third leg of that stool in terms of what the city is doing with respect to, road conditions and just all sorts of other things over which the city itself has.
You mean outside of the school?
Yeah. The city of, yeah. So I appreciate Scott's leadership on this, and it's been a long time trying to get the schedule, but it is scheduled. I think it's going to develop some momentum. And hopefully we will be able in the next meeting to give you some report and feedback from our perspective on what can be done. The issue is not going away. I mean, it shouldn't go away. It's not going away. And frankly, I think it's a very fortuitous in a strange way opportunity for us to focus our advocacy on a group that I think everybody understands needs to get to school. Everybody understands the struggles that this very large cohort of Baltimore City school students have. So hopefully, Scott, your leadership and Holly, thank you for MTA's commitment to it, and we'll make some progress.
I'll just say as an adjunct to that, at the Metro opening, it was interesting to have not one but two elected officials talk about their Baltimore City growing up experience riding on transit and the challenges of it. So I mean, it was kind of heartening actually to have elected officials who actually have lived it, and so who have been passionate about it. So hopefully we can rally a table around that concept just for the future students, current future students.
Thank you. Okay.
And the project and program delivery, we're asked to do a little report. You got a copy of it in your package. It's basically a retrospective and prospective view of what where we are. There were that you want to say a few.
Sure. I think the report certainly outlines what we have done and what we're hoping to look at in 26. I think that not surprisingly, procurement remains a top priority for this group. I think the interrelated pieces of project delivery and funding stability, kind of those outside forces, both global economic supply chain, but then also federal impact, and kind of what we were talking about earlier, you know, as budgets have to make hard choices, projects are in and then they're out. And so there's a delay, there's an opportunity cost there. And then an adjustment that we're looking at is also as this TOD element takes shape, that kind of integrates into our thought around this work group's charge of how do you start to look at that as a project? How do we make sure that we as BRTC are kind of engaging in that being, you know, a net positive? And then, of course, not forgetting that celebrating, which again, I think over the course of this meeting, it's always from an advocacy standpoint, a balance of wanting to really give celebration and kudos to the hard work that's happening every day, the hard budget decisions, and seeing real progress being made, while at the same time having to push the envelope of, you know, what else do we need to be doing? So I think that we're trying to make sure we do have some focus on celebrating those wins as they're happening.
Thanks. There's a really good multi-page report in your packets, which I encourage you to look at carefully. It will not take you very long, but it's really well organized and crisp. And just very anxious to see us make continued progress and provide support for some of these systemic issues where MTA and the system could use it. There is in the HB 517 recommendations from that work group, there are some recommendations about easing some certain procurement burdens on MTA. I assume that they're going to end up in the proposed legislation. We don't know exactly what the fate of that will be, but procurement is an issue statewide. I saw there was unrelated to this specifically, I saw there was some sort of procurement reform legislation in Don's long list. I don't know frankly what that's about.
It wasn't what I thought, so
yeah.
I'm not sure.
Every public jurisdiction, everybody here knows, whether it's your local government or your state, everybody is concerned about procurement and balancing speed with transparency and accountability and all of those things that are totally appropriate. The question is, what can you do? And the question for us for a long time has been, is MTA being treated equitably in the world of procurement? Because there are concerns that for historic reasons, it hadn't been, and that's come up over and over again, both in Lakey's work group as well as in the HB 517 discussion. So we'll see how that goes when the legislation emerges, and hopefully there'll be it'll be addressed in some way. But this is a very, very good report and a place for us to really help and lean in. So Lakey, thank you. And I don't know if there's anything in particular else you want to say about it, or if there are questions for Lakey or for Don, but please go ahead. Anybody has it?
No, I
Okay.
kind of laid it out. I
Good.
think, look at the report. I mean, Don handled most of it, but we had a couple discussions about it,
Great.
so feeling good about next steps.
Thank you.
Just two other items. One is just for information for those that weren't at the Metro Rail Car event. There was a nice handout that MTA produced. That's in your package. And then there's a rally on February 2nd at 6 p.m. at the State House that is being hosted by Better Transit Now, and that's got a little flyer for that too for you if you're interested.
Great, thank you. Okay, the agenda calls next for public participation. So I guess I'll ask the staff whether there's anybody here in person or online who's asked to be heard for a couple of minutes.
No, there isn't. And I did pop into the chat. If anybody online wants to participate, they could right now. And yeah, no takers.
Okay, nobody here in person? Yep, sorry, Eric, are you coming up?
Yeah, is that all right?
Yeah,
I did
please.
Move out.
Good afternoon, everybody.
For the record, you are?
I'm Eric Norton. I'm the Director of Policy and Programs for the Central Maryland Transportation Lines. I know everyone is eager to jump over to the Harris Teeter real quick before the shelves are bare. So I will be very brief. I just wanted to share a statement that we put out, the Central Maryland Transportation Lines put out after the CTP was dropped this week regarding the state budget and Be More Bus, like the BRTC. The Transportation Alliance supports Be More Bus. We all know you endorsed it. And after the draft CTP came out and Be More Bus wasn't really in there, we later found out there was some money tucked away, but it wasn't in there. You all sent a draft letter, John, you mentioned that, or sent a letter asking what more could be done to expedite Be More Bus, get more funding for Be More Bus. And you got a response from MTA. But I think the CTP is your answer. And that answer is nothing. There was no change, no money was added. At the City Hall Roadshow, there was a chorus of unanimous Baltimore elected leaders united in calling for more money for Be More Bus. Governor Moore's answer in this CTP is, sorry, no more. Student transit issues that just got brought up have been top of mind for the last year for this group. They've been covered in the banner. Be More Bus is a plan that could help them. Governor Moore's budget leaves them stranded. This is the large, I want to push back a little bit on like a conventional wisdom and narrative that times are tough, money's tight. This is the largest CTP in state history, $22.1 billion. Side note, that's actually an undercount. It's actually closer to $30 billion. We can talk about that later. We have the resources to do this if we want to. It's about choices. Right now, in the last CTP, Be More Bus wasn't in there because it hadn't been released yet. So we were expecting it to come out in this one, and it wasn't. Another project that wasn't funded in the last CTP, but somehow $100 million appeared for it in this CTP is widening 97. So $100 million, the state can find money for that because that's a priority. Helping people drive a little bit faster on 97 is a priority. Helping people get to school, get to jobs in Baltimore City is not a priority. That's what this CTP tells us. Dollars are there. We just need them spent in ways that actually get the outcomes we want, which is to drive economic development, get people to jobs. Right now, and we just released our transportation report card. If you don't have a car in this region, you can only get to 7.5% of jobs in an hour or less. If you got a car, you can get to any job you want. Widening 97 doesn't help those people. They've got access to cars. They have access to all the jobs they want. But if you don't have a car and you're living in the Baltimore region, your world is so much smaller than if you're driving. 7.5% of the jobs. So I just want to push back on that narrative that it's about money. We need to go find resources. The General Assembly spent the last 2 sessions passing more revenue, $400 million of additional revenue going towards the Transportation Trust Fund in the last 2 sessions. It's not a money problem, it's a priority problem. And we encourage you to be there this session. We'll be down there on February 2nd at the rally. We'll be at the budget hearings making this point, and we hope to see you down there too. Don, you mind if I have some copies of the statement and pass that around? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay, anybody else? If not, is there any other new business of the commission? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, aye. We're adjourned. Thank you very much. It's coming around.
Neither did I, but I heard it so well.
Yeah, we have a supervisor here, a lot of our staff. Just like today, we have they've been trying to catch me over the last 6 months.
We don't have
Yeah, 30 this morning. So me and Sam Sneed spoke.
It's like it is, come on.
But you're all coming, yeah,
Yeah, right? I love it.
Yes, yeah.
You guys got a great team.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Guys, coming from Baltimore County.